Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm doing something different. I'm exclusively sharing personal stories all about sleepovers I've hosted and attended throughout the years. And obviously, the majority of what I discuss on this podcast is fiction, because I talk about my favorite shows, books, movies, etc. But part of storytelling, too, besides creating fictional tales, is sharing stories about our personal lives. And I figured to start out with sleepovers. Sleepovers were always just so much fun, particularly as a kid and a young teen. Just staying up late talking about everything and nothing with your friends. But I was always the kind of person who challenged myself to stay up as long as possible. Like, oh, am I going to break the record? How long am I going to stay up this time? And there was always that one friend who would fall asleep right away. That was never me. I was always the last one to fall asleep, staying over other people's houses. At home, it's a little different. It's easier to fall asleep in your own bed, obviously. When you're in a sleeping bag on the ground, it's less comfortable. But probably the earliest memories of sleepovers I have are actually sleeping over my grandparents' house. And those were always fun with my siblings. But sleepovers with your friends are just unforgettable experiences. Just such an absolute blast. And one of my favorite memories was actually when I had a sleepover for my 10th birthday. So I had over 6 of my friends. I think one of them, if I recall correctly, she ended up not sleeping over. Maybe it was because her mom wouldn't let her, maybe because she was uncomfortable sleeping over someone else's house. I don't know. But we all stayed in the basement. So that was a first, actually, because when you have a one-on-one sleepover, we would stay in my room, or I would stay in my friend's room. And we had the big TV, and we played games. I remember I had this book of sleepover ideas, basically. Sleepover themes. And the theme I chose was some kind of, I don't even remember, some pajama party type thing. Which, is that even a theme? I mean, you wear your pajamas anyway over a sleepover, but... And I remember I had a Barbie sleeping bag for the longest time. Just this pink sleeping bag of a Barbie face, a Barbie doll face that just said Barbie on it. And then I probably must have passed it down to my sister, and that sleeping bag is long gone now. But the biggest thing I remember about this birthday party, well, there were a few things. So one was, in that book of sleepover ideas, there was this quiz you could take, and my friend took it. And it was about if you and your crush will end up together. And we all knew she had this huge crush on this kid in our class. And truth be told, I've never admitted this out loud, but I had a crush on him too. And I think a couple of my other friends did too, but we never admitted it because it was always like, oh, that one friend, she's in love with him, so of course she's going to marry him. Of course, when you're a kid, you think that kind of stuff. But it's not really so embarrassing admitting that all now because this was so long ago. And it's cute, having a little crush. But he was a nice guy, really smart guy. And when she took the quiz, are you two destined to be together? And basically she was so obsessive over him that it was spot on. Like, oh, you love your crush so much, it's destiny, whatever. That kind of nonsense. But that's just so fun, that kind of stuff. So I remember that. I also remember that same friend the next morning, or getting ready for bed, I guess. So it was really late, whatever time it was, 2 a.m, whatever, finally getting ready to go to bed. And then she was freaked out by our cat, our first cat. His name was Nicky. He was this black cat, and I guess she saw his eyes in the dark, and she was freaked out about that. And then the other thing I remember from the sleepover was that I had chosen 2 movies for us to watch. And it was late at that point because we were all up talking and doing other sleepover activities and nonsense. So then when we finally put the movie on, So I had gone to good old Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster? I miss Blockbuster. Blockbuster was so much fun, just going in your pajamas to pick out movies. Side note with that, real quick. I used to pick out the same few movies when I was really young. One of them was DuckTales, Treasure of the Lost Lamp. I used to watch that over and over. Another one was the Beauty and the Beast Christmas special, if you recall that. It had a couple episodes on it. One was with the injured bird, and then one was with Lumiere telling Fifi how he felt about her. You know, Fifi, aka Plumette, the feather duster. And another movie I used to watch over and over and rent over and over. I'm surprised I never owned it, but was Spice World. But so for the sleepover, the two movies I got, are you ready? They were The Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas and Snow Day. I know, how do you choose between those two movies? And I remember we had to put it to a vote. I was very official, like, oh, let's put it to a vote. Let's see what everyone wants to watch. My one friend who had that big crush on the kid in our class and who was scared of my cat, she wanted to watch Snow Day. And then my other friend, she wanted to watch Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas because she hadn't seen it before. And everyone else was pretty much neutral, and it ended up being a tie. And then, of course, I had to break the tie, so I settled on Viva Rock Vegas for everyone. And I said fairly that, well, she hasn't seen it, so my other friend was upset about that. I haven't seen either of those movies in a long, long time. I wonder... I remember seeing Snow Day in theaters. I don't know if I saw the Flintstones one in theaters. I don't think so. But Snow Day was a fun kid movie. But that sleepover was a lot of fun. I remember, too, we just all put cake on our noses after they sang Happy Birthday to me. That was cute. I have a picture of that. Speaking of pictures, a good segue. For my friend's birthday, I'm not naming names. I don't want to name names. You could follow along. Like I said, this episode it's a first for me, so. Anyway, so the same friend who was scared of my cat had a big crush on that kid in our class. So she had a sleepover party, maybe that same year. I can't recall. I think so. I think that same year, because she's born in the summer. So the odd thing about that was that it was a sleepover party, and most of the girls in our class were there. However, we didn't actually sleep over. So that was the theme of the party, sleepover party. We were instructed to bring our sleeping bags and pillows as if we were sleeping over, but we didn't actually sleep over. And my friend's mom was one of those strict moms, so maybe she didn't want to be responsible for all of those kids, but as a kid, you don't really think anything of it. However, the one weird thing that was even weird to me when I was a kid was that my friend's mom, at one point in the sleepover, would just take someone aside and have them get into their sleeping bags. Like, oh, get into your sleeping bag, well, I'll take a picture of you sleeping. So she took a picture of each of us in our sleeping bag, pretending we were asleep, and gave that to us as a memento, like a memory of her sleepover party. And I remember when she asked me to, I was like, okay, sure. So I went into my sleeping bag, closed my eyes, and I was smiling. And she said to me, oh, do you always smile when you sleep? And I remember thinking in my head, well, obviously I don't smile when I'm asleep, but I'm not actually asleep. I'm pretending to be asleep. So why can't I smile for this picture? And why are we even doing this? Like, who is this for? Is this to trick us years later? Like, oh yes, this is me sleeping. Like, why do we need a picture of ourselves sleeping? So I thought that was weird even when I was a kid. And thinking about this now, because I haven't thought about this in years, what was the point of that? It's just so bizarre. Like, oh, pretend you're asleep. So I was like, okay, I'll actually pretend I'm asleep. So what? And I must have that picture somewhere. Oh, to be able to find that picture, that'd be hilarious. But I must have it somewhere in an old photo album, because it was just a Polaroid. Remember Polaroid cameras too? This is a throwback, all right. This was early 2000s. But I would also have a lot of sleepovers at my best friend's house. And I haven't seen these friends that I'm mentioning in years, by the way. It's not that we're not friends anymore. It's just everyone kind of drifts apart. But I've seen a couple of people here and there from middle school and everything that there's one girl in particular I'm still friends with, and I see her from time to time. But everyone else, we kind of all drift apart. But that's how life goes. So anyway, my best friend, for one of her sleepovers, it was a bunch of us, and we all stayed in her living room. And I was 11 at the time. And I remember with this sleepover, you know when you get to the point where you just cross the point of tired into overtired to the point where you can't fall asleep. Kind of like that Angry Beavers episode, Up All Night. But that's the point I reached at this particular sleepover. We were up talking. Eventually, one by one, everyone falls asleep. And then I remember the TV was still on. And I was like, oh, God, I got to turn this TV off. And I finally did. And everyone else was sleeping. And I just couldn't fall asleep. Because first it's exciting, like, oh, I'm going to really stay up really late this time. And then, so for that sleepover, by 7 a.m, I was still awake. And oh my gosh, that's so bad for a growing child, not falling asleep that whole time. But I was overtired at that point. And I was so full of that overtired energy. So then I went up to my friend's room because my friend's dad was saying, oh, you gotta actually get some sleep, Allie. I was like, all right, I'll try. And then I went up to my friend's room, and one of my other friends had woken up at that point, and I was like, oh, I haven't even been asleep yet. And he was like, well, I'm gonna get bagels. And I was like, okay, I'll get a sesame bagel. I was just so overtired, hyper, you know how that is. So then I remember turning on the TV, and the Wild Thornberrys was on, and at that point, then I eventually just dozed off. I finally knocked out and went to sleep for a little bit because, oh my gosh, my exhaustion caught up with me. And then I woke up maybe around 11 or so. So that was the latest I stayed up at a sleepover, till 7 in the freaking morning. I'm sure if you've experienced, as a college student, pulling an all-nighter to finish any projects or studying for finals, anything like that. But that is not fun. Another sleepover for that same friend was actually for her birthday, and it was at a hotel. And it happened to coincide with, if you recall, the big blackout of '03, if you recall that, if you're from the Northeast. So basically, if you don't know about that, it was just this blackout that happened for several hours. For some people, it took them a couple days for their power to get back. But it was a widespread power outage throughout parts of the northeastern and midwestern U.S. and the Canadian province of Ontario. And it happened on August 14th, 2003. So my friend's birthday is a few days before that. So at the time of that blackout, we first thought it was from the hotel. We didn't know what was going on. But then when our parents were calling, like, oh, are you okay? Because everyone had lost power. And I remember, two of my friends, they had almost taken the elevator. And at the last second decided to take the stairs because the elevator was taking too long, I guess. So, and then minutes later, the power went out. So thank goodness for that, because they would have been trapped in the elevator. So that would have been absolutely terrifying. But I remember, since we were at the hotel, there wasn't any way for them to heat the food. So we all were sitting outside, and they had cold foods instead. I remember we were playing categories. And my friend's mom was there too, because we were in middle school, we were young, so we were just hanging out, and some guy came over at one point. We were playing categories with him, and to this day, I never forgot this. With categories, if you haven't played it, it's basically you have to come up with different words for different categories, and they all start with the same letter. So you roll a dice, and you get letter B, so everything has to start with the letter B, like types of food, types of furniture, colors, nicknames, etc. So we rolled the letter H, and one of the categories was things that scare you. And this kid wrote hairy hippo. I'll never forget them. We were like, nah, that's not scary. That's not a thing. So that was really bizarre. Those were all group sleepovers, and those are always fun. But then with one-on-one sleepovers, that's a different kind of thing, because it's just you and your friend, and those can get very existential, where you just talk about these deep conversations, and especially too when you're getting really tired and you're just talking about all this bizarre stuff that you usually don't discuss in daily life, all this existential stuff. So that was more so in my adolescence. And with another one of my friends, I remember too, earlier that day, or it might have been a different day, so this is cheating a little bit, because it's not technically a sleepover, but I just want to share this memory. We were basically doing our own little videos that we would just record and not even do anything with them, but it was just, I don't know which of us started it, but it was just each of us going back and forth, pointing out mundane things, like, oh, this is a lamp. And then just our response to every little thing, wow. You know those montages with Owen Wilson with his movies, how he just says, wow, wow, wow. So we would just say wow to everything, like sarcastically. Be like, oh, look outside. It's sunny out. Wow. That was entertaining to us, just doing this weird little video series of just us saying wow to every little thing sarcastically. I don't know. That was creative. That was funny to us. But that's just a random thing I remember about being over her house. But also, so a sleepover at her house, we would play a lot of GameCube. I remember too, she is one of my friends who introduced me to South Park. And South Park is one of my favorite shows. But that's when I was first starting to watch it. And the episode we watched at her house was The Passion of the Jew, which was, of course, the episode making fun of Passion of the Christ. So I remember that. I also remember watching an episode of the show Drawn Together. If you recall that show on Comedy Central, that show made South Park look so tame. That show was beyond crass and vulgar and disgusting, but funny, but so disgusting. And the episode we watched with the princess character voiced by Tara Strong, I remember that. And when the pig character, so that show's parodying those reality TV shows and just totally lampooning various characters and personality traits. You had the princess, you had a Betty Boop type character, you had a Ren and Stimpy parody character. That show was bizarre. I haven't seen that show in years either. Oh my gosh. But anyway, the episode we watched was with the pig teaching the princess character how to get your pizza for free. I don't want to repeat it. If you've seen it, you already know. If you haven't, you could probably look it up and watch it. I haven't seen it in years, but it's so gross. Oh my gosh. I'll just leave it at that. But then I also remember us watching the movie Monkey Bone. That movie was so bizarre with this animator guy, and then he ends up in a coma, if I recall correctly, and then he just gets sucked into the animated world of his creation, Monkey Bone. This monkey, all I remember of the thing seared in my brain the most with that movie was the part where he's taking out his organs and throwing them. But another big thing about my friend, she was really into anime too, and I was too. That in middle school, that was my whole anime phase. But my friend was really into the anime Yu Yu Hakusho, and I remember she would write Yu Yu Hakusho fan fiction, and I remember reading some of it and helping her edit, I guess. And she basically had a character that was herself, because she had crushes on two of the characters, if I recall their names, Hiei and Karama, is that his name? If you know the show, you know better than me. So she had stories about that, and I remember one part in her story where she just has Kyle show up and call one of the characters a fat ass and then just disappear. I remember that. And she's really talented too. I remember too, like, looking through all her drawings, and she would just show me each of her drawings. And we were up till 4 a.m. just going through her drawings and her explaining, like, oh, I drew this with this in mind, or this is when I thought of this. Like, her just kind of giving a little backstory about each of the drawings. I also distinctly remember too, we ate these little gummy candy pizzas. Just these gummy candies shaped like little pizzas with, like, the toppings were just all sugar-coated gummies. And haven't eaten that since. Don't know where she got that little product from, but it was good. Especially just pure sugar. And it had a little tiny pizza cutter to cut the little pizza-shaped gummy candy with. Coincidentally, the other friend who got me into South Park, she's the one friend that I'm still friends with in terms of still seeing her from time to time and talking to her from time to time. She lives in another state now, but she was also the valedictorian of our class. So both those two friends, they got me into South Park. But anyway, so she slept over my house only one time. And it was so exciting because her mom, too, was kind of strict. So it was exciting to have her stay over. And with that sleepover, I remember my sister, she was kind of wanting to be included and stuff. And my friend didn't mind or anything, so that was nice. But I remember we watched the South Park movie with my other friend as well. And it's funny when you watch something you've seen so many times, but you watch it with someone else and just kind of hear their reactions to things. just their little comments and everything. And this friend too was big into anime. I also remember too a sleepover at my then best friend's house. It was 4 of us, and the 4 of us I mentioned when I discussed the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. It was these 3 girls and we went to go see that movie together. So the 4 of us having a sleepover before high school, because 3 of us were going to the same high school and the one other friend, she was going to a different school. And so it was kind of like a last hurrah, a last get together of, we're all still friends before we all go to meet new people and new experiences in high school. And see, it's hard for me to remember conversations and stuff, unfortunately. The things I remember are the stuff we watched. Like with this, we watched a lot of music videos. I remember watching, do you remember the bands, the Click 5? I remember my friend being like, this is just a Beatles ripoff, but that song, Just the Girl I'm Looking For. And then I remember also Dirty Little Secrets by All American Rejects. So those were all fun sleepovers. And then as I got older, like sleepovers in college, when my one friend from out of town would sometimes sleep over at my house, those kind of sleepovers, we would just knock out. We'd be so exhausted, either because she had traveled far and she was exhausted and we had to be up early the next day because we were going to see a show or something like that. We went to a taping of Jerry Springer together, actually. But also I remember after her graduation party, we kind of had our own little after party. We were all still drunk. I could say that. That was after college, so we were of age. So it's all just a lot of fun. A lot of swapping stories, sharing secrets, laughing, having fun, staying up late, all that excitement. Sleepovers were always a lot of fun. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. I'll be discussing To Kill a Mockingbird. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.